We're going to have a panel right now. If y'all would come on up, the ones on this panel, we're going to have what happens when you get past the crisis stage. So we've got Michele Sellers from Jefferson County Probate Court Program. Come on up and have a seat, folks. It's pretty bad when I go into her office to talk about her, and I mention my son, and she says, "Oh, I remember that." And that was a while ago. Judge Wallace called me yesterday with his tail between his legs and said, "I'm in a jury trial. Can I send Jonathan?" Jonathan, raise your hand. Jonathan, I've got Jonathan on speed dial. He runs a mental health court program. Yeah, he doesn't like to take my calls either. But he's, and I told him I wasn't worried about him because he could talk 2 hours from a 3x5 card. And Shondra Williams is the coordinator for the drug court program in here. Don't forget when we're talking, substance abuse is a mental illness too. If you don't believe it, look in DSM-5. It's right there. DSM-5 is the Bible on mental illness. So without further ado, I want to let them talk. Go ahead, Michele.
Good morning. My name is Michele Sellers. I am the Jefferson County Probate Court Director for JBS. And I work with judges Alan King and Sherry Friday. I've been able to do that for about 15 years. They let me start working when I was 5, so that was really nice of them. Thank you. But I wanted to say first what a privilege it's been for me to be able to work with Judge King and Friday. They both have a heart for mental illness and for our system, and they have made my job very enjoyable because they truly have a heart for our mental health system. I'm going to talk about what we do. Mr. Walsh asked me to kind of give a day in the life of probate court, but I want to go off my script here for a minute because we do a lot of good things in probate court, but after hearing that story, we've got to do better. We need more resources, and whether that's money for beds, whether that's money for training, our system has got to do better so that doesn't happen again. And I just wanted to go off and say that because that is so important. Mr. Walsh talked about what an involuntary commitment is. That's a civil confinement of an individual who has become a danger to themselves or others, and they are in need of intervention. And just to kind of give a little bit of background about our system, and I got this from the Jefferson County Probate Court website. I went on there, I was like, oh, look at all this information. But during the 1980s, there were approximately 200 adult mental health hearings per year in Jefferson County. In the mid-1990s, that number increased to approximately 700 hearings, and in 2012, that number was around 1,100 hearings. In 2016 and 2017, we took around 1,200 petitions in Jefferson County. That's a lot of petitions. People often ask me when they come in my office, who can file a petition? We have family members who file petitions, we have hospitals, law enforcement. Anyone who has witnessed the behaviors of the individual can come and file a petition. We have 3 case managers in probate court, and I know that our probate court system is different. This process is done different in every county in our state. My staff, we are JBS employees, but we are stationed down at the courthouse with Judges King and Judge Friday. I know sometimes people are in different areas, but we are at the courthouse with the judges. We take petitions on individuals who are in the community, people who are already in the hospital, and people who are in the jail. If the person is in the community, our judges review the petitions, and when they come up, we help to facilitate that process with the sheriff deputies to have them placed into one of the local hospitals. Interestingly enough, I did some statistics. 28 petitions of the petitions filed in Jefferson County are on individuals who are in the community. 63% are already in a hospital, and then 9 to 10% are in the jail. So the individuals that are already in the hospital, maybe they went to the hospital voluntarily, maybe a law enforcement agent took them to the hospital. but they are there. So that our staff is there to facilitate the hearing process with the hospitals for that too. So we help facilitate the pickups for the community petitions. We help facilitate the hearing process with the hospitals and with the jails. Jefferson County Jail and the Birmingham City Jail have a physician that comes and they do evaluations and they give us recommendations as if to someone needs to be hospitalized or not. And then we help that transfer process from the jail as well. We do not take petitions on people with pending felonies, and this is something Jonathan and I have been talking about. Those usually, we send those folks to mental health court, but that is in the law too, that a person cannot have a pending felony charge and go through the commitment process. And just to kind of, in Jefferson County, our petition can hold someone in a local hospital. We have 5 to 6 hospitals in our area. I think I counted 5 or 6. And I could name them: St. Vincent's East, Brookwood, UAB, Grandview, Hillcrest, UAB West, and Princeton. Our petition can hold someone for an evaluation for 30 days. And after that 30-day mark, the person has to either be inpatient committed, outpatient committed, or they can be dismissed. Our judges go to a different hospital every morning and hold those hearings. So Judge King and Judge Friday go to the hospitals that I mentioned, and they hold those hearings there at the hospital with the clients. One other thing, well, a couple other things I want to mention in Jefferson County. In order to help cut down on the Bryce admissions, we have a program called Post-Commit, which we use Hillcrest Hospital, and we're able to keep people in our community at Hillcrest Hospital in those beds instead of having them committed and sent to Bryce Hospital. The other program that we do in Jefferson County that I'm pretty passionate about, because when I was hired at JVS, that was kind of when we started our outpatient commitment program. We have 2 teams, a therapist and a case manager and an inpatient hospital liaison. And we're able to have someone go home into their homes and into the community, and they are under a court order for five months, and our teams go in and work with that individual while they're under an outpatient commitment. Works very well. People are able to stay home, close to their families. If for some reason they are not compliant with treatment, we can revoke that outpatient commitment and have them rehospitalized so that they can stabilize after that. I think that's all that I have to say. I told Jonathan I was a fast talker, so Jonathan King.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan King. I'm the program manager of Jefferson County Mental Health Court Program. I am sitting in for Judge Wallace today, who's got trials going on and, of course, couldn't be here. And I think a lot of you guys may have been familiar with him from the last summit that was held there in Birmingham. Well, in Jefferson County, we have 2 divisions of mental health courts. We've got one in the Bessemer District and one in the Birmingham District. I am the program manager of the Birmingham District. Due to some funding, the county restarted the mental health court program in 2015, and I was actually working with the Department of Psychiatry. I am a UAB employee, but many of you may have heard of the UAB TASK program. We are the managers of the mental health court program for the Jefferson County court system. So what I do is pretty much help manage a caseload and manage 4 case managers and 1 peer advocate. I think from what we've heard this morning, we understand how important it is to have a peer on staff that's working with the clients that we serve in the community. Very, very much important. I can just remember the couple of months that we were operating without that, and what a difference it's made to have that peer on staff, that's someone that's able to say, you know what, I was in jail. You know what, I didn't take my medications. You know what, I was hospitalized. I had frequent hospitalizations, where that person can sit down with some of the ones that we're working with and maintain that comfort level while they walk through the process. So let's say, how does the process start? Clients are either identified through a couple of different stages. Sometimes we get reports there, where the arresting officer has noted, hey, at the time of the arrest, this this client may have seemed to be off medications. They may have been suffering from, something wasn't right, where mental illness may be something that needs to be looked at further. And that's sometimes in that report. One of the next stages is jail. We get a lot of our referrals directly from the jail staff, where the jail social workers either identified that person, or the jail psychiatrist has identified that person as someone that may be in need of a mental health court program versus just some of your normal processes through the court procedures. So what we do, of course, that attorney is normally alerted either through family members or just a combination with maybe sometimes to jail, making that attorney aware that, hey, this person is struggling in jail. They're not doing well, and it's possibly related to their mental health care or lack of. Normally in the jail, they have started services, so that attorney will, confirm that that person has a diagnosis that's accepted through the mental health court program, and will start the application process. What does that look like? The application process is just a general outline of some information that we gather with records to support that client has a serious mental illness. Now, what I'm speaking of with a serious mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, because we want to take someone within their mental health court program that we are going to be able to connect to services. And we pretty much use our local mental health centers to provide those services, or some out in the private sector to do that. So we want to ensure that we're going to be able to get that client the services needed. So from the application process, we work with getting that client connected to services. A lot of times those services are starting in the jail, where we're identifying what are their needs when they have a possible release date. What would treatment look like, or what would further care outside of jail look like? That may mean contacting providers, various treatment providers, getting the family involved, transitional housing involved, benefits. Maybe that person has been a person that's not connected to benefits, that's should be connected to benefits to solve maybe some financial issues or help with medications while they're in the mental health court program. So after the application is received, we process it through our office, and that person is scheduled for what's called a plea docket. We normally have 2 plea dockets a month. So what do we do at that plea docket? At the time of that plea docket, what we're doing is discussing what are the facts of the case. Okay, we're looking at the DA is there to say, hey, this is when this person was arrested, this was the presented factors that were, I guess, noted at the time of the arrest. The judge is there, the attorney, the mental health court team, and we're looking at what type of transition can we make from the jail. Would this be a person that's willing to work in the community? Are they willing to have supervision in the community? Because coming into mental health court is not anything that a judge just says, hey, you know what, you're going to mental health court. They come in willing to participate in the program because, of course, with their rights, they have the means to go through the traditional judicial system. So what we do is, at the time of the plea docket, we hear the facts of the case, and that person takes on a initial plea agreement where they have the understanding, along with their attorney, family members are present, that they could come into the Jefferson County Mental Health Court program, and we would be the ones doing the supervision. That supervision varies. Sometimes it can be from 6 months. Normally, a year is about, because we want to make sure that that person is well connected to services by the time we're working with from start to finish. So after that part, they enter a plea. That plea is pretty much held by the judge for administration to see how well that they do in the program. Are there any adjustments needed while they're in the program? And at that point, we work with them on a daily, as far as we're providing the supervision. We're connecting them to making sure that they have access to medications, making sure that they know how to obtain those meds after the program is over. Not just saying, hey, let me help you get some medications, but being able to do these things after mental health court is over, because what we found is just a lack of services or a lack of connection, where somewhere maybe in the community they cannot just make that full circle of, for my mental health to be complete, I've got to have these connections. I've got to have proper housing. I've got to have services that may connect me to medications, financial support, housing, and any other needs that we find, and even medical needs. So we work with that person as supervision, the 3 case managers and the peer, myself and another program manager during that duration of time. And what we do is connect them to various treatment programs. A large percentage of our clients that we work with have co-occurring disorders. I think we have a data analyst that works with us. It kind of give us a little bit of background of where we are and what direction we need to take. So if you look at our census, normally is around 100. I think right now, I counted it yesterday, we are actually working with 114 clients in the mental health court program of Jefferson County. 46% of those are co-occurring clients. So unfortunately, we are able to connect those clients to a couple of co-occurring programs that we have in the area. The Birmingham Fellowship House has a co-occurring program that we connect to. Also, we have an outpatient program for those with the co-occurring orders at Beacon Addiction Treatment Center. And of course, we use various other programs throughout the state. But after that connection to services, mental health services, of course, with our population having such a large co-occurring disorder also, we work with that person for that period of time, and it comes a point where they have a graduation date. And what the judge is looking at is how well did that person do? Are they connected? Will they be able to maintain after this program? And we assure and provide information that they're connected to services, they're well in the community, they've gotten reconnected to family support. We are following them with frequent reviews to see how they're doing. And at the end of that, that charge could either be dismissed or that charge could be reduced to a lesser charge. And clients, it's a really good avenue for clients to take versus just some of the traditional court systems where someone may have been suffering from a mental illness at the time of the offense and just go through the traditional court system and end up with a felony possibly. So that's what we do. Again, I'm so thankful to be here and just to see the collaboration of people that really help us in what we do in the outsources of the communities and the state, and hopefully things will continue to get better. Thank you, guys.
Good morning. I am Shondra Williams, and I have been tasked today to speak to you about drug court, which I coordinate here in Montgomery County. Presiding judge, District Judge Pamela Higgins, and Judge Jimmy Poole preside over drug court here in Montgomery. The National Association of Drug Court Professionals lists on its website that of the nearly 2.5 million people incarcerated in America, nearly half of them are in jail because of drug abuse and addiction. There are more than 3,000 drug courts now in the nation to help us battle this issue of substance abuse and disorders, and to help to get the people that are suffering with these issues on the right side of the law. Drug court began here in Montgomery County in 1999. It was under a grant at that time, and then in 2003, when community corrections was adopted here, we moved under the umbrella of community corrections. While I am a one-person staff, I have the assistance of staff there at community corrections, and it is a collaborative effort there as well as with our team. So what is drug court? Drug court is a treatment-based program, court-supervised program for drug offenders who have been charged with either possession or property offenses where drug abuse was a motivating factor. Throughout the year, because the program is a minimum of 1 year unless they have completed treatment prior to coming into the program. How do they get into the program? They can actually report to our office and fill out an application before they even go to court. Depending on their judge, they may be able to plea on information. If not, most of our cases come after they've been indicted, and they enter a plea, a guilty plea, through the circuit court, and the process begins. They file an application with us and a team comprised of both of the judges, treatment providers, the assistant district attorney, the defense attorney assigned to drug court, law enforcement. We have representatives from the VA's office, as well as from a treatment facility here in town, and myself, that is the team, the drug court team. At our team meetings, each applicant is staffed, and the facts of the case are read by the assistant district attorney. The assessment results, if that person has been assessed at that time, are given, and any other pertinent information regarding that person's case is given, and the committee makes a decision, or team makes a decision based on the information that has been given. At that time, a court date is set if they are approved and found to be appropriate for the program, where they sign a contract, drug court contract. As I stated earlier, the program is a minimum of 1 year, and throughout the program, they have a number of requirements that they must fulfill. Aside from staying clean and sober, they must complete treatment. Sometimes treatment involves more intense treatment than just intensive outpatient, which is what the majority of our clients actually participate in. But if residential treatment is needed, they may get it here in town, or if they're females, they are referred to a treatment facility that is state certified outside of county, where they can get the level of care that is needed. Each client receives treatment and an individualized case plan, which is tailored to their needs. They are required to do a number of community service hours. They must maintain employment. If they have not received a high school diploma, then they do make attempts at their GED. If they are unable to get their GED, at the very least, they enroll in classes and begin attempts to getting that. They also are required to get a valid driver's license before they graduate from the program. Many times they have outstanding tickets here in the city or other municipalities. We work with them to resolve those issues, and at the very least, if the amount of fines owed is too much to be paid before they can complete the program, then we ensure that they have a state ID, a valid state ID, before they complete the program. They meet monthly for workshops where different life skills are given to them. We also have speakers that come in to address different needs for them as well. They meet on a monthly basis for court, where they go before our judges to give a report of their progress. Any violations that have occurred from 1 month to the next are also addressed, and they are sanctioned, or incentives are given if they are doing well. At the end of their 1 year period, and for some it takes longer, their case is null prost, and they are given a certificate where that case has been null prost, and an order goes in their file. We have had a tremendous amount of success with the clients that we service. Of course, we get them from all walks of life. And at the end of the time in drug court, if they're successful, they are reunited with their families. Many of us tell us that they've been given their life back because of the intensity of the program. They've been able to, are forced to deal with their addiction, and if they're serious, they have made an active and conscious effort to make a change in their lives and become different people. It works through research and reform. We are constantly making changes as needed. A lot of you all I know are familiar with the opioid crisis right now, and we're looking at different ways to combat that and to deal with the medication issues that are ongoing. I certainly hope that this has been helpful to you. If you ever have a chance to talk to your legislatures, please make sure that you push drug court and diversion programs. They work, and they give the area and population that we service a chance to make a difference in their lives and right their wrongs and be given a second chance. Thank you.
What the trigger is. Tell me again what the trigger is to get someone who's entered the criminal justice system to you guys, who is, there's an offense, they've been charged, but somehow they get sent to mental health court versus being held in the criminal courts.
Sure, what happens is, of course, from a collaboration of either through the attorney or just the court system, sometimes it even goes back to the court police report where information is gathered that shows that the time of the offense that person may have been suffering from a mental illness, and that attorney will apply for the program versus going through the traditional court system. They'll apply for mental health court services. Absolutely. Absolutely, because if they don't understand, that's a whole different route, or if they're not willing to, that would be pretty much cause for further forensic evaluation, and sometimes those go a totally different route, maybe through Taylor Hardin or something like that for further evaluation. But with the understanding that they know their rights and they're pleading guilty, or they are willing to accept a plea of guilty. We don't at present. We've had like one or two cases where the defendants were ruled as adults due to the nature of their offense, and we did review those cases, but in general, we don't. Of course, a lot of other programs, if you look at mental health courts across the nation, some do right now, I think with us pretty much being new to the area, and with mental health courts just starting back in Jefferson County, rather, 2015, we haven't taken that avenue yet.
Commitment here in regards to people that live in the community that are not in the hospitals. What kind of efforts, if any, are going on to engage people into treatment in that time?
We do have case managers who, if the judge asks us to go and do a home visit, can go and look into that a little bit more. That's one of the options that we have. That's pretty much the other than waiting for the bed to become available. And as I say, from time to time, all the stars line up so that we can have someone picked up out of the community, because in Jefferson County, we have the sheriff division that helps with our pickups is the warrants division. So they are not primarily just for our community mental health pickups. They are doing lots of other things like serving warrants and that sort of thing. So once we can get the sheriff deputies, we get a hospital bed, all of that lines up, then we're able to get someone into the hospital.
they are not actually currently in jail when they are participating in drug court. They are required to do random drug testing throughout the month. Initially, well, they're pretty much in phases. And initially, they're tested in a minimum of 8 times out of the month, and they even call on weekends as well.
I think it's like 118 here. Well, we really don't have one. So I mean, we're basically, I mean, our caseloads are pretty full right now. I think on average, myself and the other administrator, we don't, but they actually have about 30 to 40 clients each, the case managers do right now.
Several years ago, when the significant percentage of the Jefferson County Commission decided they liked the vacation in jail for having taken substantial sums of money, one of the first casualties was the mental health court. Talk about penny wise and pound foolish. That was incredible. But amazingly enough, some of the judges got really, really creative. I know Jonathan will smile when I mention Judge Cahill, but Judge Cahill was a pretty out-of-the-box thinker. And I was able to go to judges and design our own program for mental health court or to drug court and succeed with it. And, you know, let's hope that doesn't happen again. But it's a lesson of what goes wrong has all kinds of repercussions. Just because some money gets cut somewhere and they just take an easy target, it has huge repercussions down the line. You may want to add something to that, Jonathan.
Well, yeah, I mean, with the importance of just seeing what we do in the community, actually at the jail, actually when we started back in 2015, I mean, there was a client that had been in the Jefferson County Jail with no disposition for right at 2 years with a mental illness. Of course, that person, after we came back, no one knew what to do with that person. Of course, they were facing a very long prison sentence, but severely mentally ill. When the program came back, that person entered the program, had some struggles in the program, but eventually, you know, completed the program. But again, it shows you before the program came back, there were several people with just a serious mental illness just sitting, waiting on some other form of a diversion program.
Are any of the court costs and expenses allocated to these clients, or are they able to clear out with no debt burden?
They are, unless it's restitution. I mean, of course, you know, with fines and fees, mental health court, we don't even try to go through that avenue. Now, of course, if it's where they stole a car and wrecked it, I mean, to some degree, you know, we have to work with restitution, or that may be part of their plea agreement at the time. But just as far as putting a person that's already, you know, has different barriers against another financial barrier, we don't. Yeah, and there's no monitoring cost. I know a lot of diversion programs have monitoring costs. With the mental health court, there is no monitoring cost.
Add one thing to that before the next question. There are some counties that charge a fair amount of money. I had a client in a close county to Jefferson County where they did not qualify for mental health court because they didn't have money. It was just impossible for me to believe that the difference between being mentally ill and not being mentally ill was money. But we had to think of another way to go with that. And, you know, when fees and costs are added on to folks that are in mental health crisis, they don't have any money. And the only people that have any money are the people who are already suffering in their family already. So folks that are in a position to think about that, it is one way to get revenue. There are lots of other ways besides taking it out of the backs of people who are very sick. Because to bar someone from mental health court because of money is just preposterous.
any of you address the process that juveniles how they would be handled? You were saying that there's not anything in place, and I just wondered what is in place. I mean, as far as if you have someone who is involved in a crime, who's seriously mentally ill, who is a child or a juvenile, who is intoxicated, that kind of thing.
Just to speak on that, I'm not sure. Of course, Michele and I work hand in hand on a lot of cases, but with juveniles, I mean, I'm really not aware of any services, especially speaking from a mental health court in the state. I just know that they exist throughout the nation, but here in Alabama, I am not aware of a juvenile mental health court.
And with civil commitments for adolescents, they go through family court.
Dr. Richard Craig has just sent me up to the room. I apologize for interrupting. But we've had several questions asked about juveniles. I will tell you, in Jefferson County, they're one of the only counties or few counties that started with what we call a juvenile court liaison. We took that and spread it. So for Jefferson County, they actually have a family court system. They have a juvenile court liaison. When somebody comes in and processes, they will get them over to that mental health care. They work with them to try to avoid that. It has worked really well.
I just wanted to follow up with Montgomery, with the drug court in Montgomery. Do y'all treat juveniles?
Our program is an adult drug court program. However, I do believe there are some things in place out at the juvenile facility with family court regarding juveniles. I don't know if it is a drug court where their cases are actually diverted, but I do know they have some things in place out there.
To answer about Montgomery County, every county has an access to what we call a juvenile court liaison. We felt back in 2000 it was very important that there was an open door, no wrong door process for our juveniles. So if you don't know who your juvenile court liaison is or you have interest in that, every one of your mental health centers has a juvenile court liaison. There are 38 juvenile court liaisons. Their priority population is mentally ill, substance abuse, and intellectual disabilities. They work to try to avoid anyone entering into the court system. If they do enter into the court system and have to go through the Department of Youth Services, they try to track them to come out the back door so that we try to have a seamless system. And we can get an information of who all the juvenile court liaisons are to NAMI, so that if anybody needs this information, we can get that referral information out so that you know in your county who that juvenile court contact is for mental health.
Any other questions?
No, you cannot with drug court. It's a one time. However, we do run into offenders that return to our office. Any type of relapse or any type of resources that we can provide for them, we do, and we welcome that. You know, that relapse is a part of addiction, and we welcome them to come back no matter what their situations are. And we will provide whatever resources we can, you know, regardless of the fact that they're not on the program anymore.
All right, might as well hold on to that mic. This is for your drug court.
Okay.
From a law enforcement officer perspective, the drug court statewide, does any of it communicate through a network or similar? What would help out in the streets would be something similar to a parolee or a probationer. When we come in contact with somebody, because we do exercise discretion on the street,
Right.
and sometimes that discretion may be misguided because we don't have all the information at hand. So
Right.
the drug court's communicating with a law enforcement officer on the street may help you better do your job as far as these people getting the proper treatment or if they don't deserve the treatment.
Right, that's absolutely correct. We actually have law enforcement on our team, and they do have input in the decision-making process. They can object to an applicant coming into the program. And we do have an open line of communication with them. They often call about different arrestees and information that we may provide before they actually charge sometimes. Of course, you know, you all work with them with different cases, and if they feel like they can benefit from drug court, they will call us. So we have an open line of communication with both the Sheriff's Department and the PD here in Montgomery.
Initially, but after they're assigned, in other words, they're granted to go through the program for
Right.
drug court. After that, if they're encountered by law enforcement, is there some way to put them in the system, like they're just attach a notification to a driver's license or something when we come in contact with them, that we'll be notified that they are currently under drug court, and maybe they could be referred for an immediate drug test instead of, I know sometimes drug tests, although they're considered random, are scheduled random.
Right. Well, there is not a network in place where there's an alert if they are stopped to let you know that they're in drug court. Most of them are very forthcoming. If they are stopped, they will say, please call my PO or please call drug court. I'm under court supervision. But there is not an actual alert. Now, we do have a case management system where we are alerted if they pick up new charges.
Okay, that's about the time we got, and thank you very much for your participation this morning, and thank all of you.
Quick housekeeping. If someone has misplaced a cell phone, we have it at the registration desk.
Good morning. Great panel. We have another wonderful panel you're about to hear from about emergency services, clinical services, rural and city. But before we get into the panel, just want to remind all of you that please continue to take a lot of notes, ask a lot of questions, but there are mics on both sides here. At the end of the panel, if you would come to the mics up front so everyone can hear. Because there's so many important things are being brought up. We want everyone to actually hear those questions as well as the responses. This group up here, you have a bio in your handout. They are a very distinguished group. We have Harry Finley from UAB. Harry, in the Birmingham area, orchestrates so much of the psychiatric services for the Birmingham area associated with UAB. And we have Patricia Moore, who's out in the field in the rural area and runs a community mental health center, Western Mental Health. She's presented some things earlier that I think that you're going to be very interested in and how you can develop some connections between the cities, rural areas, and then Miss Jackie, Dr. Jackie Feldman. I asked each one of them what they wanted me to present about them. And her statement was, here's Jackie. So, here's Jackie.
I am short, but I'm mighty. When Jimmy asked me to talk about this, I of course jumped on it because I'm a hysteric and I love to talk. I do want to pledge to each and every one of you, I am a ferocious advocate. I will come and speak to whomever you want me to speak for free. I will travel for free. I will cross the entire state of Alabama if you want me to talk to your city council, to your church group, to your temple, to your legislature, to your classrooms, to your NAMI group. I will come and talk for free. I'll pay for my travel. I will come. I will be there because that's what we need to do. We all need to make a commitment to change, a commitment to this process. So I'm going to put myself in the line. I'm retired. I can do whatever I want. It's so nice being retired, except I don't feel retired. But that's okay because for me, retirement, I've told several people this today, means I get to say yes to what I want to do and no to that which I don't. but I'm saying yes to you all. I'm easy to get a hold of. You can Google me. My email is there. I will respond immediately. So please use me as a resource. But we're going to talk about the Mental Health Summit. The time is now. Well, the time was now last year. The time really is now this year. After the set of speakers who spoke about their lived experience, I went to Jimmy and said, let's just stop now. What more else is there to say? Because those are the profound statements that we should carry with us when we try to go and talk with people who are in charge of making the decisions, who are in charge of funding. Those lived experiences are really the most powerful things we can share with people. But when I was trying to come up with a metaphor, I like graphics and stuff, I thought, well, this is like a puzzle, and we need to put the puzzle together. And I don't know how to move this forward. Can someone move it forward for me? Thank you. I'm an academic, so I always have to talk about objectives, just because you're getting CMEs or education credits for this. But I want us to talk about what are the barriers to excellent care. I'm going to talk about, oops, you need to go back one. Oh, you know what? This is for my talk this afternoon. I have a different slide set. So we may need to discontinue this and go to the other one. This is part one that I'm speaking to. But anyway, I'm going to talk about the objectives I'm going to talk about are what's the status quo right now for care for emergency rooms and for inpatient care. Then I'm going to talk about some best practices that I think have developed around the state. I'm going to introduce you to the vernacular, a series of words that are called sequential intercept model. Now, people who are in criminal justice understand that, but I think it's applicable to mental health as well. Then I'm going to talk about emergency rooms, inpatient care, and how we transition to community care. And Harry's going to help me. Thank you, Harry. Okay, the sequential intercept system, are we there yet? Are we changing it out? Is somebody helping me? Wanda, are you helping me get to the different one? All right. The sequential intercept model really was explained early this morning by James Tucker, who talked about Judge Johnson's 300-page decree, which is actually very interesting reading. You should all read it. But the judge has identified within the context of the Department of Corrections that there are areas that need to be addressed because there are challenges and there are points in the line of clinical care where things are falling apart. The same thing occurs within the context of someone who is living with mental illness and the family members around them. You need to be able to identify when someone is having a problem. They need to have access to treatment. If they need treatment in a more restricted fashion, they need to have a hospital bed available. They need to be able to be treated by trained staff. And interestingly enough, and I agree with this, we should work really hard not to segregate people simply because they're a vulnerable population, but instead what we should do is step up and help them not be so vulnerable. All right, so if you think about the sequential intercept, the trajectory of somebody's life. When does somebody first get touched by the mental health system or the criminal justice system? Somebody's going to show up and they're going to have a behavioral problem. They may be loud, they may be violent, they may be agitated, they may be uncontrollable. So, as talked about in the lived experience this morning, somebody talked about, well, they picked up the phone and they called the sheriff's department who came and picked them up. The question becomes, do they go to jail or do they go to the emergency room? I'm not going to talk about the jail, but let's talk about the emergency room. If you go to an emergency room that has psychiatric support, meaning a psychiatrist on site, which is very, very rare, it can still take hours. It can take hours to even get a room. You will get evaluated, but let's say you need to have more intense care and you need a hospital bed. There may or may not be a local hospital bed. In the UAB emergency room, which is, as far as I'm concerned, the gold standard of care, We have people who unfortunately get boarded for 3 or 4 days before we can find a bed for them. And I'm telling you, someone who is agitated and psychotic or manic, being in an emergency room is hardly the place you want them to be. If you're in an emergency room without psychiatric supports, that's a whole nother world, because oftentimes that's the quick slide to get admission. Nobody can step in, nobody knows quite what to do, nobody knows quite how to evaluate, and or people may be subject to more chemical or physical restraint because people don't know what to do. The other thing we talked about from people who talked about lived experiences this morning was that wonderful reenactment of a CIT interaction and how the officer said, don't lay hands on somebody because you don't know what they've experienced. Somebody goes to an emergency room and they're grossly agitated and are unable to calm down, hands will be laid, and it can be a terribly frightening, traumatic experience. So you have to remember, people are going to have that memory and may have PTSD from that situation. But let's say they need inpatient stabilization. Are there beds? Sometimes you may have to transfer to another hospital, and I talked about that experience. But if beds exist and they're open, then the patient can be admitted. But you have to understand, change doesn't happen like that. If somebody comes in with a heart attack and they go to the ICU, they're not discharged 18 hours later. It takes time for people to get stable. Now, if somebody comes in and they've broken up with their boyfriend and they're suicidal, sometimes things can change overnight. Somebody comes in and they have a blood alcohol level of 340 and they're suicidal when they're intoxicated and they sober up, then those people can stabilize quickly. But a huge number of people come into the emergency room needing inpatient treatment, and it takes more than 2 days for people to get stabilized. So that's a message out to anybody here who's an insurance provider. Sorry, I have fought many battles. So let's say they're in the hospital, we have got them stabilized. Now we want to transition them to community care. The questions you need to ask is, how soon can we get the patient an inpatient or an outpatient appointment? And will it be with a psychiatrist who can write a prescription? You know, giving somebody 3 days prescriptions when you come out of jail is great, but not when they go to a mental health center where they're seen by somebody who doesn't have an MD or an NP behind their name, and then they don't get prescriptions. So how do we deal with that? That's a workforce development issue I'll talk about later this afternoon. Can they get their medications? I tell my residents, don't write a prescription if you don't ask how they're going to pay for it, because it's useless, as you just throw it in the trash. And if they can pay for it, let's say they've got $3 or $6 or $4 for Walmart, cigarettes, medication. You know, it's a hard, and we're talking about an addiction. That's a hard decision for some people to make. So maybe we need to give them the medication or find out a way to do that. Do they have transportation? Do they have a place to stay? As far as I'm concerned, no care can occur unless you have a roof over your head. Housing first concept is very important. Do they have a job? Do they have a way to make money? Do they have other supports? Do they need help accessing entitlements? Do they need to have someone to help them kind of broker their services? All those are questions that should be asked when we're transitioning people to the community. So the time is now. The time is now for change. We need CIT training, so at the very beginning of that sequential intercept process, we can intercept right there. I think we should consider centralized urgent care 24/7 services that is welcoming, that uses peer specialists, that has 23-hour stabilization, that starts treatment immediately and doesn't let people sit in the emergency room grossly psychotic. We need to have accessible substance abuse services and emergency housing. We need to have trained crisis staff with adequate mental health supports. We need to coordinate access to beds and not do this kind of willy-nilly thing. And we need to ensure follow-up appointments. So, last slide. Need for collaborative planning across the spectrum. We need to stop pointing fingers. Well, they're not doing it, and I can't do it, and I don't have the money, and this is all my money, and I need all this money so I can take care of my people. We're all taking care of each other's people. So I would suggest that we lower the silos and all start to work together. I think services should be patient-centered. What do the patients want? Frankly, and I've told this story before, when I ask my patients what they want, they don't say, I want the voices to go away. They say, I'd like to have a date on Saturday night. And I said this last year, me too. So we need to ask our patients, what do you want and how can I help you get there? We need to be creative about how we provide our services, and we need to keep working to bust stigma. I say to you that somebody comes into the emergency room who is who's grossly psychotic and agitated is just like the person who's coming in with a heart attack, but they're having a brain attack. We don't send people out to the waiting room to wait for 12 hours when they're having a heart attack. We should not do that to people who are having a brain attack. Thank you.
So, Jackie, you're a tough act to follow. I've had to follow you a few times for the last almost 20 years, so bear with me. I'm not quite as entertaining as Jackie, but I'll do my best. I'm Harry Findlay. I'm the Executive Director of the UAB Community Psychiatry Program. It's also known as CPP. We're one of the mental health centers in the Birmingham area. It's divided up into 3 mental health center areas. JBS is sort of the parent of all of us. We contract with JBS. We cover the sort of central I-65 corridor area for Birmingham. And JBS also provides outpatient services like the other mental health centers, but JBS, unlike the other mental health centers, provides all of the case management array of other services in the residential services. We don't do residential, we don't do case management. If you could, the next slide. So, yeah, you can sit to the next slide, that's fine. That's CPP. We occupy the 4th floor of that building. We're on the UAB campus. We're unique in that we're embedded in the Department of Psychiatry in an academic school of medicine at UAB. I don't know how many other mental health centers are like that in the country, maybe 8 or so, Jackie's saying. So it's a pretty unique relationship that we have. We train residents. We have 8 fourth-year residents, and 8 third-year residents, and about 3 fourth-year residents that rotate with us. We train medical students. We train master's level social work students, as well as some nurses from time to time. Let's see, so most of the services that we provide are in this building. You can go to the next slide. Other than this building, this is right up the street where our Ingalls School is, and that's the location of our child and adolescent day treatment program. You can go to the next slide. Our outpatient clinic services, we have evaluations. Like Jackie was saying, you come in for an evaluation at CPP, you always will see a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner that same day of the evaluation. If prescriptions are necessary, you'll walk out with prescriptions with an appointment for return for that, for a provider and maybe a therapist or some other services that you might need. We can provide psych evals, neuropsychological evaluations with a neuropsychologist. We have a psychopharmacology clinic with psychiatrists, nurse practitioners that's also staffed by psych nurses and psychiatric social workers. We have psychotherapy services, groups, individual therapy, family therapy. All of those are done by our licensed independent clinical social workers. You can go to the next slide. We offer day treatment services, both intensive day treatment and supportive day treatment. The intensive day treatment program has a psychiatrist that's attached to that program that sees the patients at least once a month, monitors their progress, and provides medications for them. Both of those day treatment programs also offer GED classes. You can go to the next slide. let's see, Ingle School it's comprised of 3 different programs. That's the Child and Adolescent Day Treatment Program, therapeutic preschool program, and the summer program. Most of the students that are in that school come from Jefferson County. We have a collaboration with Jefferson County that provides some of the teaching for that school, although we do contract with other neighboring school systems. You can go to the next slide. Oh, so the REACT program. This is sort of my baby. Years ago when Jackie hired me at CPP, REACT was just sort of a research project for us. The state didn't have any assertive community treatment programs, and we got in on sort of the ground floor with a lot of help from NAMI, from Greg Carlson, who's back there in the back. Lots of other people made that happen, and we started the very first assertive community treatment program in Alabama that's still up and running. There's a difference between ACT and PACT in Alabama, and as far as I know, there are only 2 PACT programs. There's the JBS PROACT program, which started around that same time, and the REACT program. These are the most intensive outpatient programs available. They're heavily staffed with lots of psychiatrist time, lots of professional social workers, as well as nurses. The services are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's been known as the hospital without walls, and pretty much will do whatever it takes to help people live independently in the community. We also have a collaboration with JBS to provide sort of supportive services for some of the folks in the REACT program for the housing grant that JBS has. So that's permanent supportive housing. There's 50 units of that. We also utilize the Jefferson County Housing Authority as well as the Birmingham Housing Authority to help people live independently in their own apartments. Next slide. These are some other things that are important to talk about. Unfortunately, DMH no longer has the IDP program or the indigent drug program, but we have our own person we employ to work with drug companies and our patient assistant programs that they offer. Most of the time we can help people that don't have insurance coverage come up with some sort of medication that works for them. Let's see, appointments and access. We always see state hospital discharges within 72 hours, not just because we're contractually obligated, but because it's the right thing to do. We see local hospital discharges from UAB within 7 days. Again, not just because we're contractually obligated. Our new patient appointments, right now we run about a month out, although we have special arrangements with like the mental health court that Jonathan was talking about, as well as some other entities that we can get people in sooner that are a much more vulnerable sort of population that needs to be seen before that 1 month time. One more slide. Our follow-up appointments, unfortunately, we don't do as well with this as I'd like to, and it's because we don't have the resources to follow up with people that miss appointments. We do phone calls. We have staff that does a great job of calling people and locating them, but I don't have a lot of ability to go out into the community and track people down. We refer people to JBS that have missed their appointment. If they're a state hospital discharge, JBS does a great job of helping those people get back in for their next appointment. But sometimes our folks tend to fall through the cracks and we're not able to find them. REACT is pretty full and can't go out into the community and do that sort of thing. Transportation is another barrier. We don't provide transportation services other than within the REACT program, but we do work with Medicaid non-emergency transportation services as well as public transportation. We work with probate court and Michele. We do outpatient commitments. We accept pretty much all of them they send our way. That's a probably underutilized thing that we could do more of. Let's see. We sometimes assist family members just to help them get in touch with Michele and probate court and talk to them about what the process might be. encourage them to file petitions when we feel like that's the thing to do, and send them your way. Next. So that's it for me. I want to make sure that we have time for Patricia to talk about your rural mental health center as opposed to an urban mental health center. And we'll save the questions for last.
Hi. I'm Patricia Moore, Executive Director of West Alabama Mental Health Center. We are a rural community mental health center on the west side of the state of Alabama, covering 5 counties. Those counties are Choctaw, Greene, Hale, Marengo, and Sumter counties. We've been around for a while, and we're basically the provider of behavioral health services in those 5 counties. And when we're talking about crisis and ongoing services, we try to address as many issues as possible during the regular business hours. We do outpatient. We have outpatient offices in all 5 counties. When we think about services and set up services to address the needs of our individuals that we support and serve, we look at it as being by county. And that is, one reason is because it is a large geographic area to cover. So therefore, travel time, we don't want most of our time to be travel time. We want most of our time to be time spent with the individuals that we serve. So we have our offices in each county. Basically, we have about 14 locations for all services provided in the 5 counties. On the mental illness side, we have outpatient services. We have a rehabilitative day program in 2 counties. And we have some residential beds, 10 beds in the specialized behavioral home. We also have about 22 supportive apartment beds, and we have 16-bed specialized medical home that is in Moundville. That was our most recent home that is open. When we were told that Bryce Hospital was downsizing, it kind of alarmed us for a minute because we knew that we used Bryce Hospital for a lot of placements. And if that was not going to be available for those individuals under commitment, then we needed to make sure that we had additional services set up in the community in order to serve those individuals. And if we're it, then we need to have it set up so that we can provide the services that we need to provide. We do have crisis and emergency services after hours and weekends. That is something that we have maintained continuously. We have master's level clinicians who are assigned to emergency services for after hours and weekend face-to-face contacts as needed. As long as the individuals that are in crisis, we do have the requirement that they go to the hospital emergency room, or if they're arrested and go to jail, that we will go there to see them. But it's basically in the hospital and in the jails where our clinicians can go see. We have regular outpatient services, like I said, on an ongoing basis. We do respond to face-to-face after hours when it's determined that that is needed. And we were, when we received and started working on the Bryce Census Reduction Project, we started collaborating with our hospitals, and we actually presented to each of our hospitals in each county that to see if they would establish a adult psychiatric bed unit. At that time, we had no adult psychiatric beds in our 5-county area in West Alabama. So we had memorandums of understanding with hospitals as far away as Birmingham, with Hillcrest, and we sent some individuals, if they were under commitment or acute care, to DCH North Harbor. And that was it for us. We also had an agreement, because we're so close to the Mississippi line, we had an agreement with Alliance Mental Health Center there in Meridian for commitment services. Just so happened, Brian Whitfield Memorial Hospital, after some convincing and explaining to them about acute care and commitment process in a community mental health center, they did open a 10-bed adult psychiatric unit in Demopolis. So we collaborate with them in regard to getting individuals in to acute care hospitalization services as soon as possible. We do have an access to care process where we have a single point of contact for individuals requesting services. That access to care point is also encouraged to be used by law enforcement and other providers and other individuals and individuals themselves to access services. So it's a 1-800 number, and it goes into our access to care department, which is manned, and when someone calls in, they should get someone on the phone to talk with them about services. We try to get people in, individuals in at the next available appointment. So therefore, the wait is minimized for those services. So for them coming in. One area of improvement that we do need in regard to our access and in regard to our emergency services and crisis response is we don't have a clinician available for each county. We only have one person on call for 5 counties. And that is impeding us keeping any of the clinicians on staff, because a lot of the clinicians now don't want to do emergency services. They don't want to be called after hours. They want to do their job and don't want to do emergency services. So we are having to address that issue in regard to our staffing. We do have a court liaison and a crisis therapist that is on staff that responds to the probate court and law enforcement and individuals who are in jail to help them access services as soon as possible, and hopefully have them spend as least amount of time as possible in the jail. We have always been innovative and accepting of services to be coming to our area. Most of the times, and people know at the Department of Mental Health, when there's an offering for new services, we always try to figure out a way to get some of the services that is being offered. But that is because we want to be available for individuals who need those services. And one of the areas most people ask about when it comes to rural mental health services is doctor time, having a psychiatrist available. And we have worked hard to do that. We do not have a full-time psychiatrist. We have a consulting psychiatrist, but we also do telepsychiatry, and we have those services available. Our consultant psychiatrist, she also delivers services through our telepsychiatry connection, and we have contracted with another psychiatrist to provide those services for our individuals. So we address that issue and that need for services in the community mental health center. We try to be available, we try to be responsive to the community, and we try to make sure that individuals receive services that they need. And so therefore we are responsive based on that. Having our law enforcement trained and working with the law enforcement, we do training with our Demopolis Police Department, but we would love to have the opportunity to train with all of our law enforcement departments across our 5-county catchment area, because they come in contact with the individuals, and if they have to go into the hospital and bring them to the ER, most of the time that transportation is provided by law enforcement or family members. And transporting someone in crisis, we want both the family and the law enforcement to have as much information as possible in how to treat those individuals with respect and dignity and get them to services. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and we thank you for this opportunity.
We have some questions, Don.
Solved all of them.
Can she expand? Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you expound a little bit on your telepsychiatry program? Yes, ma'am.
For some time now, we received a grant, and we were actually an FCC pilot project. We also was a part of a grant with the Bristol-Myers Squibb Foundation, who actually provided our first units for telepsychiatry. What that does is that if a psychiatrist is in, say in Montgomery, and they're licensed in the state of Alabama, we can contract with them and provide telepsychiatry in Demopolis or whatever our locations are. And the psychiatrist can see the individuals through the telepsychiatry equipment, through telemedicine. Yes. And we have to do that. We tried to recruit a psychiatrist to Choctaw County, and we could not get a psychiatrist to go to Choctaw County, so that brought up the availability of psychiatric services in Choctaw County is entirely through telepsychiatry services.
I think the development of telepsychiatry is one of the most innovative technologies that's happened in the last 10 years in psychiatry. And I would certainly suggest that as a group, as a community, we'd be thinking about how we can use telepsychiatry in emergency rooms. There have been plenty of studies that have shown that other states have been able to massively improve access and quick evaluations for people who are living with mental health problems. Even if the ER itself does not have a psychiatrist, they can access one through telepsychiatry, and it's proved to be budget helpful, because what you can do is sometimes you can prevent hospitalizations and really enhance crisis stabilization if you have that telepsychiatry capacity.
Dr. Feldman, how many individuals do you need in order to be invited to come and speak, like to maybe a NAMI group with / staff and or consumers?
One.
That's terrific.
My email address is real easy. It's jfeldman@uab.edu. And that's the one that I check most frequently, so I'm happy to come and do it.
Jackie, I don't know what equipment y'all invested in the UAB system, but something that we have available in our office is a system called Zoom. I don't understand it at all. That's what IT does. But it's so efficient that you can download an app on a cell phone, and the receiving end can see you and talk with you over the cell phone. It's unbelievably efficient. I've done depositions that way, and hiring and firing and that sort of stuff. And so there are ways to do it.
There are absolutely ways to do it. I'm on the credentials committee
That don't cost that much money.
at UAB, and we just accepted, and UAB is a ponderous, bureaucratic, lovely place to work. But we just accepted the regulations and have developed the regulation and accepted them in terms of understanding that telemedicine is here to stay, and it's incredibly effective and useful. And as the months and years pass, the technology costs are going way down. One of the challenges we had at the UAB Mental Health Center, because we actually tried to do this several years ago, and it really was not successful, was trying to negotiate with other mental health centers in terms of credentialing issues. But I think those are surmountable, and I think whatever leeway can be granted and whatever progress we can make would be incredibly helpful, because I mean, we have residents at UAB who I bet would love to moonlight doing this kind of thing. So there are efficiencies that we could put into the system, and I think we could be providing better, certainly emergency crisis intervention care with telemedicine.
Thank you for your work. It's just some great stuff that's going on. But for people like Mark and, well, I have a son in Taylor Hardin Hospital right now. Can you talk about the connection between Taylor Hardin Hospital, where the work is so good? It's just remarkable where my son is at this point. It's just absolutely remarkable. But can you talk about how closely you work as the safety net, and what is the communication between the community mental health center and the psychiatry and the psychology at Taylor Hardin to make sure this thing stays on track and is truly successful on down the road? I know there's a lot of variables, but what can we expect? What is the connection there, if you could?
I can speak a little to it. I think what you're underscoring is that there continues to be a disconnect. And typically people aren't sent, well, they are not sent from mental health centers to Taylor Hardin. They have to be incarcerated within the context of the city or county, probably a county jail system, because they're there for potential felonies. And they are then referred to Taylor Hardin for an evaluation and treatment if they're found not guilty by reason of insanity, or they can spend time at Bryce as well. So when they are released, they are typically not released to the community. They're released back to wherever they were incarcerated, and then they're followed up at the mental health center. So I think that disconnect is what's happening, is we've got really good care, I think, at Taylor Hardin and at Bryce, and they get sent back, and I don't know how much time they spend within the local incarceration before they are then discharged. I think we do need to work on firming up that connection, and how can we ensure that once they go back to the local place of incarceration, they continue to get treatment, and that once they're discharged, they are seen quickly. Now, I worked as a federal court monitor for Tutwiler for 5 years under it was a different federal case. Alabama is the make-me state. Nothing happens without a federal court decree. But one of my suggestions at that time, and it was many commissioners ago, which was, how about if we work with the Department of Corrections? Because like UAB Mental Health Center has a fiduciary contractual obligation to see people discharged from Bryce within 72 hours. Not 3 work days, but 72 hours. Why, as a sister agencies, why can't DOC and Department of Mental Health work together and say, not only does that if somebody who's coming out of the Department of Corrections should be seen within 72 hours if they need mental health care. Why don't we do that? Why don't we make that a contractual fiduciary obligation, just like we have to see somebody out of Bryce? So that's my one suggestion to the Department of Mental Health and Department of Corrections. They're sister agencies. We're all working for the same thing. We don't want somebody coming out of Bryce to relapse. We don't want somebody coming out of the Department of Corrections to relapse. It saves money to take care of people quickly, to get them engaged in systems of care. So I would just suggest that's something we do.
Hello? In the involuntary commitment area, there are some probate judges who require a psychiatrist present in court to make these things go through. Is there any movement on the state basis to amend the state laws to allow telepsychiatry to be used in this context?
Not that I've heard of, and I think that's a great suggestion. We're fortunate in Jefferson County that our judges come to the hospital. Thank goodness, because I can't imagine any psychiatrist getting up and going down to the court. And I think use of telepsychiatry, or even by phone, is a really excellent idea. And I think that's something that we should work on.